Hello, Trailblazer fans, Blazers Edge readers. Welcome to another Blazers Edge video cast here on blazersedge.com. I'm Sam Tung. Along with Dave Deckard, we have an email question for you all today. It is a multi-dimensional email question today, Dave, about Chris Kaman, Spencer Hawes, and just a bunch of different topics that we're going to be rolling into one video cast here today, Dave. Again, before we read the email, you can continue to send those emails to blazersub@gmail.com. Dave has been answering them all throughout the off season. We're answering them on the video cast as well. So blazersub@gmail.com. Make sure to put mailbag in the subject line so Dave can find it easier in that email inbox. So the question today, Dave, comes from Kyle, and Kyle asks, as a sports fan, how do you handle crushing disappointment? Not crushing defeat, but actual disappointment in your franchise. I've maintained since the trade deadline that the single best move the Blazers could make this offseason was to add Spencer Hawes via the full mid-level exception. As it turns out, that's exactly what he signed for with the Clippers. The Blazers' big move was signing Chris Kaman with the second year barely guaranteed. Would less than $6 million more on the books for next year really have affected the team's overall flexibility, knowing the cap will rise? Watching the Blazers seemingly pass up on one of the best fits for the team in free agency for some promise of quote-unquote flexibility is a little too much to swallow. That email, again, comes from Kyle. So, Dave, there's a lot in there, so let's try to break this down a little bit. The first one, the first major question, and it's kind of, it doesn't have anything to do with X's and O's. It really has to do with, you know, your thoughts, obviously, on the Chris Kaman deal. I know you've written about it at length. Really, we've all had an opportunity to write about that, so you can check out our written comments online. But, you know, did you find yourself with similar disappointment? And how exactly have you dealt with that, you know, as a fan slash follower slash analyst of the team now that Chris Kaman is the guy that the Trailblazers went with this offseason?
Well, I think the disappointment factor is less for me. I'm not necessarily disappointed with the Kaman signing. I think there is a gap in expectation between what Hawes would have given and what Kaman will give. Obviously, three-point shooting is the sterling example of that, but Kaman really does a lot of things well that Hawes also does. Kaman is a good defensive rebounder. That's one of Hawes' strengths. Kaman also has a good inside and mid-range game, so it's not like his offense is impotent. He'll score for the Blazers. He'll also be happy coming off of Portland's bench. Hawes probably would have too. I mean, he certainly will have to consider that if he's playing for the Clippers, but Kaman is probably a little bit more of an uncomplaining bench player who will make do with the minutes he gets and will do a fine job among Portland's reserves. So there's really no complaints with Kaman. There's no crushing disappointment with Kaman. What you ask, or what makes you quizzical, is why isn't this a little bit more of a longer-term commitment if the plan going forward is to keep this core together? Hawes' obvious advantage is that he's, 26, and Kaman is in his 30s, and so he's just not a long-term solution, even if he were the perfect stylistic fit. And you can tell that not only by his age, but by the contract. It's designed to be disposable. Did the Blazers need a disposable player at this point if the plan is to keep building the core up from here? There are only a couple alternatives. One is to say, well, Kaman's going to be part of a trade, but if you make him part of a trade, then, you know, who else are you trading with him? Is he and a bench player worth that much? Is it going to be a bigger splash than we've seen? Or, you know, is this going to be another middling kind of deal? And the other possibility is simply that the Blazers are going to go forward, dump Kaman, and then try to take another whack at using cap exceptions or cap space by dumping someone else next summer. But then you have to ask, will they be more successful next year than they were this year or last year? So at some point you have to ask yourself, where is the move that's really going to catapult this team into elite level if they are planning to hold the cards they already have, and if they're trying to add more.
You would think, and part of this question too, Dave, is the idea that, the salary cap is going to go up at a certain point. Are the Blazers being too conservative with the way that they're protecting that flexibility next offseason, next summer, which is really the way that this entire roster is designed? So, there is a part of this that you wonder, should they have kept that cap flexibility or really worked to protect that? But then at the same time, isn't there somewhat of the argument where, look, maybe there wasn't anything available. The Robin Lopez type of deal was not out there for the Trailblazers to make, and I'm more making the comparison here that, you could get a guy on a very reasonable deal, and it would fit into what the Trailblazers are trying to do. And maybe this was kind of one of those, we have to do something. We can't not use the mid-level exception. This is the best option we have, but we also want to make sure that, we don't want to commit to a short-term plan long-term just because we can. And I think that might be, how much of that factors into the way that you feel that the Trailblazers did with their choice at the mid-level.
Yeah, exactly. Basically what they're trying to do, they're trying to parlay this mid-level signing into another move down the road. They're not just valuing it for itself, but they're trying to turn it into a trade using Kaman's contract as ballast, because it reduces after that second year and therefore might be attractive to someone looking to dump salary. Or they're trying to parlay it into simply preserving cap space to take another swing next summer. That's understood. The question, though, is the path forward, if you know you're going to keep this core together, does not involve a lot of cap space next summer. Either cap holds or re-signings are going to eat up a whole lot of that space. You're not going to have the big level money to play with. So therefore, you would think the obvious course would be to say, we've got this core intact, and look, we have a mid-level signing this year. We have a mid-level signing next summer and maybe one the summer after, and those are our main vehicles with which to improve this team. And if you look at it as like a 3-year plan where those 3 signings are your way forward, then it doesn't matter so much if you get the center of your dreams this summer, as long as you get somebody this summer, somebody who's going to make a long-term impact over those 3 or 4 years of a full mid-level contract. In other words, the Blazers could have said 1/3 of our improvement plan involves this wing player that we are signing this summer to a 3 or 4 year deal. And then next summer we're going to get our center, right? And we're going to fill in the corners. If that's the plan, they've essentially wasted this summer's signing by making it temporary. They've taken away 1/3 of their options. So they're telegraphing that that is not the plan. So one of two things is going to happen. Either this move has to turn into another one, or they're simply not planning to keep this core together in the way that people are assuming they will.
So that's a huge statement, by the way. I think that one thing I want to get back to that point, Dave, but I think something that we need to touch on as well, and it's something that Kyle alluded to. The reality is the Clippers right now are a much more attractive franchise than the Trailblazers are, and I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind during this entire thing, is that Spencer Hawes may have signed for the mid-level exception, but the Trailblazers were the first team at his door, and the reality is they probably said, this is my price for my client. If you can't meet it, then we can't do business. But the price for a team isn't just a dollar amount. The price for a team is also, what pieces can they bring around them? What market are they playing in? What other opportunities might that player have? I think that, is it fair to you to kind of brush off the table that it wasn't like the Blazers for sure had the chance to get Spencer Hawes and decided to go in a different direction with Chris Kaman? I guess I can't say that for sure, but I think it's probably pretty accurate that, if Spencer Hawes didn't want to come to the Trailblazers, that, Kaman was their second option. It wasn't like they could have chosen between the two.
Well, that's absolutely accurate, but that creates its own set of problems then, because at what point will that not be true? The only way the Blazers can gain advantage is to get demonstrably better than another team. the only way they can get demonstrably better than another team, at least with this core, is to add people with vehicles like the mid-level exception. So it becomes a chicken and egg thing. And if you can't get either, you don't have any breakfast. I mean, it doesn't work. At no point will the Blazers be able to look at the Clippers and say, we are a more desirable destination than they are, unless they make some of these signings. And look, I am not concerned that the Blazers are not in the running for Carmelo Anthony. I'm not concerned that the Blazers are not in the running for Luol Deng or Trevor Ariza. Okay? If you're not in the running for Spencer Hawes, you have a problem. And the Blazers have to do something to overcome this problem. And I don't know, you send your coach at midnight on day one to talk to this guy and you still don't get him, that to me is an issue that the Blazers are going to have to address. And it's not like they don't have a young roster. It's not like they don't have upward mobility. They've got to find somebody who's able to close the deal. This was supposed to be one of Olshey's strengths. And if he doesn't have it, what do the Blazers do? What exactly are they? What exactly is going to change? You know, I don't get it. I don't understand why Hawes isn't a gettable player for the Blazers. He is not a super in-demand guy. He might be in the lower part of the top 10 this summer. I kind of doubt it. He's probably somewhere in the teens, and there are only 30 teams in the league, and the Blazers are a playoff team. What is missing in this equation? And, by the way, the guy's a perfect fit for what Portland does. Terry Stotts could have laid out stuff, and I'm sure did lay out stuff to him saying, you are going to fit like a hand in glove here. This is going to be great for your career. And still he goes somewhere else. That's a problem. Who's coming to the Blazers then besides these one-year cheap rentals? If Portland can't get anyone but them, I don't know what this franchise is going to do.
Well, and then let's wrap this up then, Dave. I mean, you were talking about how the team, you know, there is what you had just said about how the Blazers can't obviously survive on cheap rentals unless they have, you know, the top couple players in the league. But additionally, they're also a team that can't ever really attract any of these guys. So maybe, you know, when the Blazers had this meeting with the with Haas, excuse me, and I feel like at this meeting they probably had a general idea of whether or not this guy was going to sign with them. And it might have been one of these cases, Dave, where the team may have said, look, if we go into this meeting and we realize that we can't even get Spencer Hawes, then we probably do need to sign a guy like Chris Kaman to a short-term deal and really start to rethink the way that this team is going to look in 2015. I don't know if that was the sole reason or it was it was the straw that broke the camel's back. But you have to think that really went into the decision to have this one-year deal, because I think that your point about what this team is going to look like next summer, I don't think these guys are dumb. I think they know that they were a top 8 team in the NBA last season, and if they can't score a guy like Spencer Hawes, then they might really have to, you know, swing for the fences if they want to try to get into the top 4 or even, you know, even further than that.
Absolutely. And the thing that's becoming evident is either the Blazers can't sell themselves as that kind of team, there's not enough of a distinction level between them and everybody else, or the rest of the NBA is just not buying that they're a top 8 team, and the free agents aren't buying that this team is going somewhere, which is a legit perspective too, as much as we don't want to hear it. So something radical or more radical will probably have to happen to shake that up, because if this is going to be the new norm, the Blazers are in trouble. They cannot bow to the idea that, well, no free agents will ever come to Portland. It will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's not necessarily been true in the past. It doesn't have to be true in the future, but they better do something to shake this up, because it cannot become the new norm with this franchise, or this franchise is going to suffer.
Well, that's going to do it for us today on the video cast. Big thanks to Kyle for his email today. You know, the signing was a big one. It was a much anticipated one, and as you just heard from Dave, something that there are a lot of different angles that you can look at this thing. So thanks to Kyle for allowing us to expound on a lot of those. That's going to do it for us on the video cast today. For Dave Deckard, I'm Sam Tung. Again, thanks to everyone for joining us here On the video cast, we will talk to you all soon with continuing off-season coverage as well as Summer League, which is coming up very soon. So you'll not want to miss that. So continue to keep it here on BlazersEdge.com.